Well, good morning. Okay, last year we started the momentum, if you will, with what LaserApp was doing. And there's always been a desire on Ed's part to have LaserApp as a true onboarding tool. Because in the past, what it was the database, whether it be Redtail, whether it be our database, whatever, would push the information onto the form, but if any changes are made on the form, then okay, that's fine. You'd have to go back to the database and put it back in. So it'd get rid of some of the problems faced in getting a rep to provide you with good, clean paperwork, but it wouldn't take care of the whole thing. And let's see if I can figure out how to use this. The green button is what starts the flow. The red makes it go backwards. There we go. Okay, over the years, I've had a lot of activity with adult education. And one of the things you need to be aware of, and this is where you find your reps, where you find your staff. The panel that was up here earlier, they were talking about getting the assistant on board, talking about people who are kind of entrenched in what they do. They really don't want to change. We have a nice word for those people if they get really fiercely resistant. We call them internal terrorists. So when you find your people, whether it's your reps, your staff, you tend to find people in one of 5 points of competency. You have people who might be just unintentionally incompetent. In other words, they're just sort of in a daze, condition white. Life just happens around them. Not a lot you can do with them. Then you have a group who are intentionally incompetent. They know they don't know, and it's kind of in your face, I just don't care. Kind of hard to work with them. They can get very rebellious. They can dig in their feet. I think you referred to them earlier. The third group is where you can start working with people. They're consciously incompetent. They know what they don't know, and they're willing to admit it. You can start to work with this group. Then your goal is you bring them up to a point where they're consciously competent. Now, it's important there because when someone's consciously incompetent, they need to think about what they're going to do. One of my avocations is I instruct pilots. And it's nice when they get to the point where they are consciously thinking through, where am I at in the pattern, where am I at in the flare, what's going on, what's my environment? But your real goal is to get someone to become unconsciously competent. You're coming in, you got a quartering tailwind, gives you a little boost, you automatically nose forward, power on, stabilize it, bring it on in, or you make a decision, get the heck out of there. So you're unconsciously competent. If someone comes back later and says, how'd you do that? Why'd you do that? Oh, let me think about it. I'll get to that. And you do. But you were unconsciously competent. So what does that have to do with you, why you would want to get your reps on board, and what are the issues you're going to face? Because you really want to get to the point where instead of reaching for the piece of paper and the pencil, they're reaching for the system. So part of this, I think your reasons to want the rep on board is it cuts cost, it speeds things up, you heighten your security, you just make things happen faster. Let's face it, most of you are paying between 80 and 90%. You're on razor-thin margins. You don't have a lot of leeway. Think about it. If you have, if you have a $10,000 GDC order, don't we wish, well, $20, $30 for a FedEx envelope, big deal. So when you have a $1,000 order with about $40 at GDC, now that $20, in your piece is 40 or whatever. So you have to watch your dollars. And that's important here, Remember last year we talked about, the first rule of life savings, how many people does a dead helper help? It doesn't serve a purpose for you to be dead, and financially dead means you're out of money. So that's a reason why you would want to move the rep into this. Real quick aside, why wouldn't you want the rep on board? I think the bottom line there is you don't trust the rep. You trust they'll screw it up. You'll trust they'll do a NIGO. You trust they'll do something poorly. And the speed of trust is, if trust is present, things can happen very quickly. So I would encourage you then to find out what you need to do to get to the point where you'll trust the rep to do the right thing. Now we move over to why would the rep want to be engaged with this? You know what, boil it down. They'd like to get paid faster. They really would. They'd also like to know that they don't have to be doing retreads on paperwork. It was done once, it was done right. Get the business on down the road. They like the security idea. They like the idea of leveraging their assistant, which is very important. In my case, when I started in 1978 with E.F. Hutton, do you know how many 50-year-old people want to take financial advice from a 23-year-old planner? It's pretty much zero until if you're in the male population. What I did was I became a specialist in financial planning for women. And then I went and I found the community where they had small houses, big trees, older women staying home or working part-time, nearing retirement, empty nesters. They had cash, and they had little or no debt. And guess what? I was like their college kid who had done well. They would listen, and I would use education, and they'd make the sales presentation. Same thing happened when I went to Integrated Resources to build the Rocky Mountain Division. All of my salespeople, all of my branch managers were substantially older than me. Again, education brought them on. And think about education, the value, and we talked about it. The panels talked about it. Everyone's talked about it. But what comes first? Confidence or competence? And I'll have a lot of young people, oh, confidence. You got to have the confidence you can do it. Great. Stick them in the cockpit, take them up, do a few laps around the pattern, climb a little higher, jump out with a parachute, and let's see how their confidence gets them on the ground. Competence really does matter. So whether you're teaching from a financial planning point of view, whether you're teaching, in my case, a pressure point technique to law enforcement, whether you're teaching reps to sell more or to adopt a new technology, whether you're teaching your staff, you really have to appreciate, one, the value of education, the value of training, move them to that point where they're at least consciously competent, and give them the confidence to move forward with the technology. Get them to quit running back to what they had. So those are all things that are important. Part of that is you really need to respect also the why question when you're doing adult learning. Adults want to know why we're doing this. So that's important. You need to understand why you're doing this. Your reps need to understand. And that takes training, that takes education. Another thing to remember, every time someone handles paperwork, you increase expense, you increase opportunity for error. It just happens. And as expense increases, you start to run the risk of violating, this was from a 1980 or 1990 Harvard study on entrepreneurial and business success. What they said were there were 10 rules to business success. Number 1, don't run out of cash. Number 10, don't run out of cash. Number 2 through 9 should uphold number 1 and 10. Because you run out of cash, you have a problem. Harvey Mackay, back in 1992, wrote a book, Beware the Naked Man Who Offers You His Shirt. Okay, so if it's too good to be true, or you want to do a little background on no matter who you're dealing with. Can they sustain this? Can they carry it forward? Are they not violating rules 1 and 10? Now, it's also a competitive industry out there. Think Pac-Man. Someone might be after you. So we've seen consolidation. And when it's your turn to be in facing the jaws, I believe it was Aaron up here on the committee, or on the panel. What did he say? He said, you can compete with LPL's technology because there's a lot of technology out here at a very affordable rate. Well, in the Old West, it was said that God created all men and Sam Colt made them equal. Your technology is your equalizer. So stand your ground. Look into the technology. Don't let a recruiting opportunity or a rep retention opportunity fly by you just because you wouldn't equalize it and you wouldn't level the playing field in your favor. So with that, you also have to take into account how much and what kind of technology can you adopt and not lose track of your core competency. What are you good at? Because if you try to really focus on things you're not good at, and maybe they're not quite as important, you're losing track of. I had a friend who used to say that if you'll focus on improving your weaknesses, after 10 years of work, you'll have some strong weaknesses. What you really want to do is you want to focus on your strengths, supplement your weaknesses. It's often said, it's misquoted, that Ben Franklin said that be a jack of all trades, a master of none. That's not what he said. Be a master of one. Be a Renaissance person. Be a Renaissance man. Have a lot of skills, but be the best at one thing. And if you're running a broker-dealer, you're running an investment advisory, you're running your part of a broker-dealer, be the best at it. Boy, how many people live their lives like they're walking on eggshells trying to make it safely into death? It's kind of like when I used to coach lacrosse, and I'd have kids out there on game day, and I'd say, what are you guys doing, saving yourself for practice? So, get into it. Be good at it. So be the best at one thing. Another thing is when you're handling things, if you were passing that match from hand to hand to hand and somebody stumbles, bad things can happen. So the more often you handle it, the more opportunities for errors, mistakes, disasters, whatever. Then you have to take into account the learning curve. I like this on the far left side of that visual. That's that little kid from that video playing with the magazine. Then you work your way on up. So you want to take into account the learning curve. Now, what we have done that's different, new, we've talked about it here, but this is fully implemented and working, is to use the Laser App tool as a primary onboarding. So think about it. You're doing a training class for your reps. You give them an ink pen. You give them your new account form. You have them fill it out with an ink pen. Then you take them to your database entry. You say, okay, do the same thing on the computer. Well, if they just filled it out with an ink pen and it's the exact same form, how hard is this? But how many times have we dealt someone, we're trying to get them into a database, and they'll be looking at something like, well, reg line 1, what's that mean? First line of registration. Well, it says MI, what does that mean? What's in front of it? It says first, what's in back of it? Last, it might be a middle initial. You know, and I don't want to be terribly condescending, but we have seen this. You know, where people, it's like, well, you know, look at it. Well, in this case, look at it. It's the same thing you had. Now, you're trying to train assistants. We were talking about that earlier, the group was. What's important with an assistant is get them on board. And one of the first stumbling blocks quite often for an assistant is learning how to read the rep's handwriting. And you will still have handwritten forms. Because, you know, let's say they're on the road or they're out at Denny's and they just want to get it done and they fill it out and they hand it off to the assistant. Well, it's kind of nice when the assistant just has to transcribe from field to field. It's exactly the same. And what we see with this whole interface with Laser App is they're seeing exactly what's in front of them on the screen at every point. So that's very important. So with that then, let's take a look what happens in our WebOps dashboard. The rep is going out just with an Internet Explorer or Chrome or whatever, or if they have a Mac. And they come in, the very first thing they come to then is they get to see their workflow, what's in progress. So the top line in this case, it's in progress. You don't have to call them, they got it, it's there. The one in yellow, there's a problem here. Just needs a response, you're not busted, but we need something back. So it's a communications tool. Very quickly, they click on it, they see the deficiency, they remedy the deficiency, they communicate back with you, and they move it forward. The two in green, those are done. They're approved, they're through, and if that was today's business, the rep packages up the app and check. If it's direct business, sends it directly to the sponsor because this has already been signed electronically, it's approved, it's done, the images are in, it's all good. The red one, you're busted. That got rejected for some reason. So then what happens is when they're going to put in a new account, they come into the account. And again, they have to start with us because we have to know where Laser App is in space. And by the way, this works with Enterprise and it works with Anywhere. So you have to know where it is. You have to keep track of it because we want that data back after they make changes. So then what happens, they go directly onto the form and they fill out the form, field by field by field. And if they click a checkbox, we already have that mapped right back. They don't have to understand your codes. They don't do drop downs, whatever. They just click the button. And they go through the rest of the form. And when they're done, there's a little post button on there. If they click it, it tells them if the account's been added. If they started out and they were building an account with a joint account or a joint owner, it'll show 2 accounts have been completed. So then what happens is, again, if the rep can fill it out with an ink pen, they know the technology. It's your form. If the assistant can read it and transcribe it, they're trained. They know the form. There's a confidence that comes from that competence because they're unconsciously competent in handling their ink pen. So let's work with these people. So then what happens is they really did do database entry for you, and then they print it. They get signatures, scan it back in, attach it to the account, because it's right there, upload the image. They immediately see where it is in workflow, it's there. Hopefully they get the heck out of the office now, or they're, maybe they didn't even go in, they hand it to their assistant, and they're off and they're making another sale. They're doing more planning, they're doing whatever they do. Whatever they do that takes advantage of their strengths that makes them money and in turn makes you money. That's really what you want them to do. A salesperson who's sitting around the office a lot probably has skinny kids. So they need to be out in the market. So then what happens back at your location, the broker-dealer? You've signed in. You're a level 1 compliance officer. I mean, I would not have, right now, how many of you have your compliance managers, officers, your senior compliance working in the mailroom? I'll bet you don't. You have a $12 or $13 or 14-hour person who's in there opening the mail. Well, the same thing occurs here. So the level 1 comes in, the new item comes and finds them. And again, they're probably logged in and just doing their work. So what happens is then on the left screen, they see if something popped up, they see who it's from, what was attached, what's its status. They look over the image, go through it. If they need to look at any of the data, in their case, they're probably only looking at the customer and the rep. They're probably not getting the transaction action. Again, they're a level 1 compliance officer. So they've reviewed it. They approve it. And now it's escalated to the level 2. So with the level 2 compliance officer, it's not somebody working in the mailroom. That's your resident bullet catcher. So what happens there is that person, again, can review the image, can review whatever data they want to work with. And again, they might have more. Instead of just rep and customer, they might have the ticket for approval, they might have the transaction, whatever. So then what they do is they've approved it. The rep immediately, upon refresh of their screen back at their office, knows the status on the workflow, and it's out the door. So again, if I'm in Colorado and I put this in, or my assistant puts it in at 10:15, 9:15 in your world, if you're here in California, hopefully you let it cycle fairly often. And again, part of the way this is structured is we do not want the compliance officer to absolutely be a victim of tyranny, the tyranny of the urgent. So I'd recommend you give it a 15-minute, maybe a 30-minute cycle. Let them get some work done, some concentration. And then in 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever, it will recycle and say, you've got something here. Same thing is if they need to take a look at something. Let's go back over here. I must have been hitting the, let me go back out of here. One more. Okay. So what happens with the compliance officer as they approve it, though, they go through, it comes and finds them. They look it over, they approve it, they approve the data, they sign the form electronically, they're out the door. The rep is doing their shtick, they know it's approved, they send it. So very simple. And if there's a rejection, there's information needed, then they work with it. Now, in all of your cases, we're all awfully busy. What if you already have a commission system that works? You don't have to take advantage of our commissions, and we play nice with others. So if the data comes in and you need it exported, you need it pushed, you need an ODBC pull, we work with you. So if you're too busy to take on the whole pie, take on part of the pie. So then what if you already have a compliance system? And again, I was talking to a gentleman, and he said, well, ours is a T1 compliance system. It's a day late. This is right now. This is in progress. That paperwork is sitting right there on the desk. But if you have a compliance system and you've integrated it, you've placed it, again, push the data out of our system to them, pull it from our system with no DBC, whatever. We play nice on the playground. Now, speaking of compliance, one thing that I did want to bring to your attention. There are some, and I hope you guys read this. It was only 87 pages. I hope you replied. But it's the additional supervision. Now, one of the things on here is old news. They're saying that a rep should not, a producing OSJ manager, should not provide compliance on their own business. So that's old news. They're beefing it up a little bit. Now here's the part that I think you better pay attention to. It says there's a general assumption that to assign one principal to supervise one OSJ. And in the text they also say anything above 2 OSJs managed by one compliance officer is considered unreasonable. So those of you who've built up where you have, let's face it, in some cases the OSJ manager, it's kind of a reason to give them an override. And they do some work, some cursory work, but you back them up through the home office, you back them up through a principal, and you kind of tidy up around them. If this goes through and gets on the books, I think you have a little trouble defending that. And what I would see out of this is you're going to see OSJs collapsing back into more consolidated setups, and you're going to have OSJs and principals managing more and more reps. So what does this do? If they're shuffling paper and you don't have a system and it's not systematized, you're going to overburden them. So I think this is one of the things to be looking at for the future. Okay, also, what if you have an imaging system? Imaging is part and parcel with this whole thing. It's built in. But if you have an imaging system that works and you're happy with it, no problem. We'll drop the image right out to you. We were talking to a gentleman earlier this morning. He wants to go ahead and just have an ODBC pulling the image. Now, the one problem he has an older system that still maintains a PDF library, whereas ours is embedded in and a little safer, a little faster response time as data, but we can render out PDFs for older imaging systems that use that kind of a library. So again, we play nice on the playground. Also, what if you already have a data aggregation tool? You're using Broadridge, you're using, Albridge, whoever. That's great. I would venture that you have some reps who haven't adopted it. And this does become a nice alternative because just part of the system, if you're taking in these data feeds, you have a position aggregation. Now, we do not get into performance reporting. That's not our thing. I'll get you in touch with Alan G. and you can have a nice conversation with him. So again, pulling and pushing data, that's fine. We're very nice on the playground. So one of the things I've always lived by, there are people out there who unknowingly accuse me of being good at follow-up. And one of the things I always tell them, help me help you now and you'll think I'm good at follow-up. But if it gets put off and needs follow-up, well, one, make sure Lee knows about it. And we've delayed the process. So if we can get this done now, let's get it done. And that's the same thing when handling the paperwork. Let the rep help you now. Help me help you now. So let's get it done. Now, with that in mind, I want to, Tony Grego, is Tony in the audience? He is here today. This is a gentleman who can help you now. How many of you, by a show of hands, sell alternative products? Okay. How many of you feel that FINRA is kind of gunning for you a little bit? Exactly. I do have one client just told me, a testimonial, literally. He said, my active involvement with, and my membership with RISA, I truly feel helped hold the FINRA group at bay in audit because I showed them I really was serious about the compliance and I was serious about due diligence. And Tony is here as a guest of Ed Beggs. I'm going to encourage you to look for him. They have 410 introducing broker-dealers on board. If some of you are diehard, will never sell an alternative product, go talk to him. He may help you strengthen the defense of your position back home, or he may say, well, come to a meeting and meet these people. Some of them, they're not all bad. Some of them are. So anyway, he does have a meeting coming up on October 6th through the 8th over in Vegas. If you're a retail broker-dealer, it's free. And they'll even help you with some of the room costs. So please find Tony Grego if you owe it to yourself to be part of RISA. So help Tony help you now. You're here and he's here. Next thing, how many of you have Laser App in place and there are certain companies where the forms are not available? It's an inconvenience. You're trying to get a system-wide adoption and then you have an office that says, well, we sell this and it's not there. You can also now, Blake Bjordahl has been put on full-time with Laser App for the specific purpose of getting more forms in the library, more companies participating. So if that rung a bell, hey, I really wish they had this company or that company, please get a hold of Blake. He's here. That's his contact information. Let him know. He'll do your legwork. Give him the contact information. He'll go talk to him. So it's important that we keep building and rallying around this. Laser App has a lock on the market. Let's help them improve it. It's good for us. It's good for everyone. So back to us, the C5 solutions, the 5 Cs, obviously we have commissions. That's what we're known for. Been at it since 1984. Very good at it. And if you already have a commission system, fine. We play nice. If you need a commission system, come talk to us. Also, from a compliance point of view, the system grew out of Integrated Resources Equity Corp. We had a very, very strong compliance push then. So from the get-go, even back in the days when it was built in COBOL on DOS, very strong compliance present, just keeps growing. And as you've seen with the compliance console, and by the way, when you walk into the exhibit hall, second table on the left, we'll be glad to show you how this works. More importantly, we'll also be glad to get a hold of you and give you a walkthrough. Now, part of it, I sent most of you an email, invited you to give me your new account forms to review or bring them with you. We had 6 companies take us up on that. We can give you a quick assessment, no charge at all, and tell you how well that looks like it will convey to a fillable form that can feed good data back into your system. So we'll work with you on that. And then continuity planning. That's one that always throws people a little bit, but we had the statistic when Ed was speaking, people are getting old. Baby boomers, I'm one of them. 10,000 a day turning 65. You do need to be able to relate to the youngsters coming in, and now it's terrible when you get to the point where you see somebody who's 40 and say, boy, it's a nice kid. But it happens. This is a continuity tool. We have companies around the country where we are the senior employee. We've been there longer than anyone. And there's continuity in systems. So as you have a changing of the guard, as you have people coming and going, when there's that consistency and a progressive system moving forward, there's continuity. And we've even had companies when they were the Pac-Man, the one doing the eating, they would actually put that company they were absorbing onto our database, say 90 days, 180 days, whatever, get it moved into a manageable where we all knew the same thing and then merge it in. Because they didn't have to, didn't have to have the shock and awe of, oh my goodness, I have this many accounts and how do I get them in here? So there are ways that you can use this for continuity. Finally, the consulting. We end up doing most of our consulting for free because it helps our clients or our prospects, but it's part of the puzzle. So with that, please help me help you now. Come see us. My staff is here. We're available. We'd love to hear from you and give you a good walk through. Trinidad, come on up. And give you a good walk through how it works either here or preferably even online. Just enjoy your lunch, and we'll look forward to meeting you over in the exhibit hall, and I look forward to letting you see firsthand what we can do to help you.